right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DAOs Project podcast, week 4. We have a special guest this week. Ethan's here, as always, but we also have Jesse, ICPJesse from Moonshift and a number of other initiatives, famously of the fondly missed Neurotic podcast.
Not
And
that fondly from how this is going, I have to say, actually.
I miss it. It's nice to have some ICP to listen to as I ran outside. So welcome, Jesse. I would love for you to just give us an update on what you've been doing and how you're plugged into the ICP ecosystem at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Hello, Taoists out there. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you guys about our project and Moonshift. And we've actually been thinking a lot about how Moonshift interacts with DAOs and DAOs that we are kind of targeting as projects that we want to work with in the IC ecosystem. So I'm going to tell you a secret. You think you're here to interview me. I'm here to pump you for strategic information to help me grow Moonshift. So thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. But yeah, so I've been involved with the ICP ecosystem since around the end of the year of 2021 through a whole bunch of different projects. I was the first marketing contractor in the special projects group working with Dfinity, doing a lot of interesting and fun creative projects there. I made a bunch of videos. I co-hosted the Neurotic podcast with Kyle Langham. I also did the Taco NFT project, which was super fun, and a lot of collaborating and working with people inside the ecosystem. So more recently, I co-founded Moonshift with my co-founder Byron from CanScale, who also created CanDB, as well as he operates Ops, which is a fantastic utility for helping manage your cycles on the IC ecosystem. So we're in pretty deep on the IC ecosystem. And we were trying to figure out, we wanted to do something in this space, and we wanted to do something targeting ICP. So the core of the idea was thinking about, we'd worked on a bunch of different projects and we worked on games, and we'd done some gaming things, and we wanted to turn our eye back to the IC ecosystem. And I was really thinking about need, that I wanted to make something that people needed, that really filled, thinking about that sort of product market fit and not being a nice to have to being something that people would jump into the deep end of immediately, and sort of what is a need in the IC ecosystem. And marketing is something I care a lot about and work on. And marketing is something people love to complain about. Complaining about Dfinity's marketing is sort of a classic topic in the community, but complaining about projects marketing too. And a lot of these projects are really interesting, cool projects founded by developers that are really rooted in the code and in the functionality, and not so much in the communications and the marketing. And we looked at the IC ecosystem and specifically at SNS projects. And we said, we've got all these different SNS projects, and some of them are doing some really interesting stuff. And a lot of them have communities and token holders and users. And we see the token holders and users saying, why isn't your marketing better? We want your marketing to be better. And then we'd sort of see the projects being like, we also want our marketing to be better, but we're not in a position to hire a full-time marketing person necessarily to take things in that direction. And sort of in that tension of projects with communities that want their marketing to be better and projects that want their marketing to be better, we felt like in that tension, there's something really interesting and an exciting opportunity, which is how can we sort of connect these two forces that want to go in the same direction? And that's where Moonshift was born out of. We describe it as like a reverse Fiverr, where it's a job board. It really was directly inspired by playing a big RPG game, and there's a job board that's like, go and do this task, get paid, go and do this task, get paid. And we love, especially with the time we spent building games, we love gamification. We find it fun and exciting to feel like you're on a quest, to be like you're accomplishing something. And we were like, how do we bring this sort of quest giving kind of approach into IC? And so that's sort of the nucleus idea that Moonshift was born out of. So on its fundamental level, it's a really simple job and quest board where projects can say, go do this thing, and then submit proof that you did it, and then when we approve it, you will get paid out. So that's like really simple. But we think where a lot of the strength lies in this is the tech and product fit for the IC community specifically, right? So we have projects that are SNSing and they're creating these tokens and they want to give the tokens to their community. That is what the tokens are for. Tokens are for distribution, they're for decentralization, they're for rewarding your community. And so all these SNS projects have governance tokens. They're all standardized tokens. And so we're like a light bulb went off in our head. And we're like, we can build something that takes advantage of the underlying strength of the IC ecosystem. It's tough out there. Like building a business is hard. Building an app is hard. You need every single advantage you can get to get going. And so by building a project that is on the natural strengths of the IC ecosystem and the natural strengths of the IC tech stack, that gives us a leg up and an ability to move fast and make, I joke, move fast and make things, because I don't really like Facebook's attitude about things. And so that was kind of the idea. That was like the big light went off. And one of the things we can do now is it takes us about 3 minutes from request to turning on any ICRC token in the IC ecosystem. So literally we like get a tweet that's like, hey, could you turn on the Motoko token? Could you turn on the FPL token? And it's no problem. Hold on. Done. And I love giving back a time-stamped Twitter post that was like, here you go. There it is. And so that's kind of the core idea. And we worked really hard to build an MVP really quickly. And so we just released that. Unbelievably, I mean, Moonshift has been live for 12 days now or something, 10 days, something in that neighborhood, a week and a half. And it has been really, really fun and really exciting for us to kind of get it out there and engage with people. So things we're really working on right now is helping people develop what kind of tasks are a good fit. And we created sort of a really broad multi-purpose tool, and we're excited to see the creativity that people use to apply it. So we sort of started with Twitter or X as a kind of focus point of what a sample micro quests that people can do. So make a meme, write a tweet, make a video, those kind of create small marketing content that is then incentivized with tokens from the ecosystem. And so every time there's a completed shift, we think there's like, it puts multiple wins on the board. It draws the projects and the communities closer together. It creates additional utility for these tokens beyond the governance utility. Now there's an additional ecosystem. It helps them give out the token. It states that this work is worth something and the token is worth something, and imbues both with sort of meaning and financial ability. And so we're really excited about it. I described to the developer team, we're really putting the capital M in MVP, where we cut our feature set all the way to the bone in order to get this thing shipped and get this thing out the door. And now it's about finding the garden path, what that means, garden path development. When they talk about on college campuses, oftentimes you have a park or a quad and there's sidewalks, and then people will find their own garden paths, and then that they find paths through things that are shortcuts, right? Yep. And then you go in and you put down cement where those paths are. So you let your users' activity show you what's working for them, what's not working for them, and grow it from there. But that was a big info. So now hit me with some DAO information and let's get into it.
Sure. Well, that's great. I've used Moonshift for a few things, and for the ETH heads or the Bitcoin heads out there, it's a micropayment system that operates on Bitcoin and Ethereum, which ICP is great, and we have a small community of people who are really passionate, but there are a lot of people out there that probably want to hire people with ETH and Bitcoin, and Moonshift lets you do that really, really easily. So I know I ran mine in CK ETH and was able to give out Ethereum to people. It's really, really awesome. Ethan, I think
I'm gonna disparage my own product just a little bit.
Okay.
So we are doing business in the CK synthetic tokens, right?
Sure.
On our system, we're not doing actual business in Ethereum. We're not doing actual business in Bitcoin, because there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, right now you can only log in with an IC. We only support Plug. We're actually going to bring on some more wallets in the super near future. But we are definitely interested in doing business. I'm a little bit of an open book. I like to just develop in public, right? So we are really looking at, we've got a little bit of traction in the IC community. Can we expand into these other spaces, right? And one thing we've really learned is so much of crypto is so tribal. Hey, come and do business in CK ETH is kind of a non-starter, I think, for a lot of Ethereum people. And certainly come and do business in CK is a stretch for Bitcoin season tours, never mind traditional Bitcoin maxis. But we are, and the actual thing we're really thinking about is, well, should we think about, could we build a version of this that does do business in those native tokens? And would that be worthwhile for us to consider?
I think you just tell people that's what you're doing, right? So if you're earning that CK ETH, those people for all they know they're earning ETH, and at
Yeah,
some point they go hit withdraw, right? And they
yeah.
don't know that they just think they're withdrawing from, as long as they get Ethereum in the end, they're
Yeah,
happy,
yeah. I
right?
think I
So
think that's what we would have to do. We'd have to create a off ramp into that native token. Yeah, but do we have to work with like Dex then or something? Welcome,
no,
welcome to the product development meeting inside. Like I said, I'm
no,
hijacking this whole podcast.
you'll have to
Um,
integrate with the CK BTC minter and
yep,
withdrawer, and this and
yep.
the CK ETH minter and withdrawer. But you just tell people, here's the address to send your BTC to, here's the address to send your ETH to. It'll all just work. You'll credit it to their account. I think you can do that fairly easily with very low fees, because the fees will be in the CK tokens while you're moving
Hmm.
things around. And then when people withdraw, you will have to pay the fees to withdraw. But that's
Sure.
another. Ethan, I know you've used Moonshift also. You have any comments or input or thoughts on what Jesse
Oh yeah,
said?
I've got a grand vision on how we can tie in DAOs and Moonshift. If I can ramble for a little bit.
Sure.
Please.
Yeah.
Let me
So
let me open
so
up my notebook here and I'll mute my clacky keyboard so I can take some notes.
so what we've been talking about on this podcast is just kind of this abstract idea of DAOs and going into detail on how there's a lot of theory right now on how can we actually go and make these things happen, because a lot of times you see DAOs these days or it's like a company, and if we're doing with no shade on a lot of SNS projects, but it's like a company and they're handing out kind of shares and they're kind of doing everything, and there's the core team, but the like a true spirit of some of these DAOs is to be able to be truly decentralized and not have that like central planning, central control type of thing. So all that to say, when I see Moonshift, here's the marketing thing. You're gonna throw up some money, be able to do these micropayments and all that. That's good. But at least in relation to DAOs, I could see it's very powerful. I want to do like I'm working on a DAO project. A lot of this infrastructure doesn't exist. Okay, yes, I can have proposals and be able to take money out of my treasury and do these things, but there's so much friction and so much headache in dealing with these low level things. But I see something like Moonshift that can be one of the tools, part of the infrastructure that DAOs need to be able to allocate some money from the treasury over to Moonshift, have delegated maybe a few people or however you want to delegate. Okay, these are the people who are going to approve, reject different things, and have Moonshift be able to not just with marketing, but just really anything that we've talked about. You're going to need to have some decentralized builders, marketing, any sort of these things where you really need to one distribute your tokens out to people, because that is kind of a pain right now, and then have a good way of being able to have people contribute and be easily rewarded and be able to see approval and rejections. So I feel like Moonshift can be one of those tools that really helps out just DAOs in general with the ability to have that flipped, like not central planning. Hey, here's what we need. Here's our requirements. There's a bunch of other things potentially in the future, like reputation can be involved in some of these delegation of works and other decentralized processes. But I think Moonshift can really be cool as a tool on top of DAOs that can really make DAOs function a lot better.
Like you're imagining we sort of just remove the marketing focus and it's more of an all-purpose getting business done. Here's a task, here's a payment plan, and then creating, I think in theory we could for that maybe create essentially an API so that because what you want then is the DAO to be able to approve or reject based on passing resolutions or something like that. This is part of the challenge of DAOs is it's such a brand new thing. It's such a change in the way business gets done that I think it's DAOs are really great at the things DAOs are great at, and they're bad at the things DAOs are bad at. Which seems like real common sense, right? That's just reflecting back on itself. If you want a DAO to compete with essentially a company that can do anything, DAOs are great at approving code changes and moving tokens in and out of a treasury. DAOs are great at things that live within DAO's area of expertise and live within the sort of known realm of what is under the control of the DAO. But then reaching out of that and crossing that bridge, which is going to be super necessary if we want to see DAOs go mainstream, then Moonshift could play a part in that as sort of a tactical tool for crossing that bridge, right? In and out of the DAO's sort of core control.
Yeah, I think that at least now core DAO concept is slow. And I think slow is probably a good thing for a DAO to be, but having that next layer like Moonshift, okay, we go from the slow to like, okay, now we got some good UI and things are quicker and things are kind of delegated. So you kind of have that next level of a DAO.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll glom onto this a little bit. One of the things that we've been building based off of this work we've done for DAOs is we started building code infrastructure. The first piece of code infrastructure that we wrote was this ICRC 75, which is basically a standardized way to build and consume lists of people, accounts, values, and other lists. So you can have lists of lists and things like that, right? The purpose is for a DAO to be able to create a list of these people they're in this role. This group of people are in this role. And I could see something, especially one thing that I think, Jesse, is going to be one of your challenges, which I'm sure you probably run across, is quality control when you're doing this stuff. Right now, the quality control is completely on the person creating the shift, right? So if I want to say, hey, you have to have 1,000 Twitter followers, well, I've got to go and manually check that when I'm approving my moon shifts, which I did on a couple of them, and a couple people tried to sneak in there and say they didn't meet the requirements, so I rejected it, which I felt bad doing because they did the work, but that was the rule. And so I could see DAOs using ICRC 75 to create lists and say, if you are one of our DAO marketing members. So we have a marketing team or a marketing role, and you apply to get into this role. So now we have 100 people that own our token. We can verify they own our token, and they are on this list. So hey, you guys on this list, we've made available $5,000 for you guys to go do this task. You can go do N number of them or whatever. And then there's a list of approvers who are on a different ICRC 75 list who are allowed to either approve or reject the work being done. So you're able to sort of tie in, just like you're able to easily approve ICRC 2 and any token. If you use ICRC 75 in the future, you'll be able to say, okay, we're able to assign a role from your DAO to any of these roles in our application. Super, super easy.
What happened to ICRC 3 through 74? That's what I'd like to know here. What happened to them?
They're out there.
Have to find them. Have to mine them.
We could show you the list later, Jesse. There's lots of good stuff on there. But yeah, so lots of great stuff with Moonshift. I think it'll loop back in as we go through some of this content. I'm going to switch over real quick and start in talking about our patterns for the day. We have our DAOs.icdevs.org is where this content is held. And there's just a massive amount of content. If you're into DAOs and you want to go explore these patterns, we would love for you to go in, give us your feedback. You can find this on GitHub and submit pull requests if you decide that we haven't gone into detail enough. We would love for you to do that as well. We'll merge in your changes with attribution. And of course, this is all supported through ICDevs.org. And so if you'd like to go continue to support this work, more work like this, for us to go deeper into these topics, you can, of course, go over to ICDevs.org and give a donation, mint some ICDV for yourself, which we are still trying to find good ways to use the token, but it will give you some cool internet points in the meantime. So today, we're going to start with incentive alignment. And I think this is a great place to start with Jesse joining us, because one of the largest and most direct incentives that you can have is paying people to do work for you. And so Moonshift's an interesting tool, of course, to do that. But we also talked about a lot of other ways to attempt to incentivize people. So this pattern supports resource optimization, which is, of course, our top level pattern in our pattern language. And what we're really looking at here is getting people to do work for the DAO. We want people to be incentivized. It's one of the reasons we look at tokenization. In any organization, it's one of the reasons that you generate a culture in your organization. You want to incentivize people to get the work done. That is your mission, and that you're trying for all the things that you are trying to achieve. So some interesting forces that come into play here for incentive alignment. You've got these individual goals versus collective goals. You need to leverage individual goals to reach your collective goals, of course. And then there's a spectrum as well along short-term rewards versus long-term rewards. Pay me now versus give me something that's going to vest over 5 years. And then, as we talked about last week, there's always complexity in setting metrics. You have this Goodhart's law that we spent a lot of time on last week that says as soon as you make something a metric, it loses its effectiveness as a measure. And so we're going to have to keep that in mind as we talk about incentive alignment as well. Some of the obvious solutions that are presented here are token-based rewards. So for the utility that you bring, you get a reward. Performance-based bonuses, which of course could be dependent upon the impact of your work. We talked about impact last week. And then also democratic participation incentives, which we see a lot in the utility of most SNS and most IC token as well. People being asked to participate and incentivizing their participation. So therefore, let's go do that. Let's help align incentives. And there are a number of ways to look into it. But before I go into the supporting patterns, I'll just sort of throw it out there. Throw it over to Ethan first to say, Ethan, did you have any thoughts as you were looking at incentive alignment? Did you have any thoughts that you wanted to bring up specifically?
Yeah, so I was thinking specifically with this. I don't know if there's a different section, but when you're thinking about incentive alignment, do you consider certain more disincentive or punishment type of things as part of incentive alignment? You have to stake something in Slash, which incentivizes you to do good behavior.
Yeah, I think so. So I think you want to lead with carrots instead of sticks.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some research in the DAO space and in cryptocurrency that slashing is more effective, which I guess makes sense, right? You want to avoid paying. People are usually much more aware about avoiding pain than being proactive about avoiding pain than they are about being proactive seeking out incentives. I think it's because there's always lots of incentives out there, and there's a number of universes you can go pursue that have different incentives. If it's a punishment mechanism or a slashing mechanism, it's a finite thing. So it's much easier to reason about. If you're a Ethereum node, if I don't execute this code properly, I'm going to get slashed and lose my stake. So I better make sure I'm running the right version of the software. I think it makes you very keen on getting that done. I think you can include the punishments there, but that also brings in the tough part. And maybe we can ask Jesse if he's thought about this. The tough part for punishment is you have to get people to put something at stake first.
Yeah.
And that is a hard thing to do. Like that's your biggest hurdle is you got to bring in customers or participants who believe in you enough to actually put something up at stake. And so Moonshift could be interesting as a quality control metric to say, hey, you can earn $5, but you got to put $1 up, right? That would potentially drastically increase your quality and people following the rules.
Yeah, that's something we've thought about when we've talked about how do we, right now we're really focused on micro shifts, right?
Mhm.
Small tasks. For us, we think a lot of the sweet spot for the amount of dollars we're talking about is $1 to $5 for a lot of these
Mhm.
tasks. They're small tasks. But if you want to do something that pays $500, for example, you want to hire someone for a job or something like a larger contractor kind of enabled space, the kind of thing that I would want a contract for, doing work for a company or a person or something, things that trigger tax paperwork and stuff like that. So how do you ensure good faith in those situations? So putting up a sort of earnest money, good faith deposit is something we've really thought about too, right? So you can imagine, let's say you have a $500 job to write documentation, for example, or something like that. Write all this additional documentation. Take a little load off of Austin. Let someone else write the documentation for a little while, and you're going to pay $500 for it. There's a bunch of problems there for our existing system. If you just said, hey, we're accepting offers, I certainly would be very reluctant to do $500 worth of work and then submit it and just see what happens, right? That's kind of tossing it over the wall and only one person gets it. That's a tough sell. If you allow someone to claim it, how do you know they're going to complete it? What if they do a good job or they don't do a good job? I mean, what if they do a good job is a whole other situation, I guess. But what if they do a bad, if they claim it and then they just sort of drop it and then someone else can't claim it? So the idea would be someone puts up some money. It's a little like buying a house, right? You put up money in sort of an escrow that ensures everyone's operating in good faith. And I think money is highly motivational for exactly those relationships. So I think these are all the problems we're thinking about, and they are challenging because in a traditional, again, like a traditional business arrangement, you'd have like a contract with someone that says, hey, I'm going to get paid this much, and there's threat of legal action or something like that if you don't. But you have a fallback on if this doesn't happen, I have a recourse or I have options to keep everyone well aligned. I think your model, you can almost think of it like playing poker, right? That's what the buy-ins are for, is to the blinds require participation in the system that you
Yeah.
are profiting from. I don't know what that balance is, right? It's hard to say, oh, this is the exact right amount, but I do think there's a little bit of if there's a $1,000 logo design gig or something like that, when someone wants to claim it and them claiming it puts a hold on it in some way, right? That prevents other people from doing it or something like that, then that money, it relies on, it really needs a trustlessness nature to it. You have to feel confident that that sort of good faith or escrow money is not going to be stolen. You have to feel confident that the system will not necessarily depend on the people, right? What you want is code is law, and the code says this is being fulfilled and this is being executed, and then the money, not unlike code being delivered for an SNS approval, the payload is delivered. The problem is as always, the problem is the people, the Ultron problem. It's all the squishy meat that is screwing up our beautiful DAOs. here and getting in the way. And it's the people being unreliable, people being, I'm really talking myself into, maybe the problem with DAOs is people is what I'm really coming to as I keep talking here. But how do you
DAOs are trying to solve the problem of people?
Yes.
is my mentality.
We got to get
Yes.
all these people out of these DAOs. That's what I'm saying. We just replace us with a bunch of AIs, and they'll vote on the work, and I'll just kick back and collect my tokens.
Yeah, no, we have a couple of patterns that speak directly to that. Specifically, there is one of the magics and beauties of DAOs is, and if you want to have a good one, you need to do this as well, writing code to replace a lot of the messiness of people. You don't eliminate the people, you just eliminate the busy work and the mess in between and streamline the connections. I think that's important. So it's a little bit of a yes, but yes, you're trying to get rid of parts of people or the hard parts of people interacting, but the goal is people. If we're not intersecting with the real world, then what are we here for? Right? So what you're talking about has direct impact with ICDevs and the bounties that we've done and things like that. So there's typically 4 different kinds of people who show up to do bounties. There's you put out a bounty and somebody shows up, they say, I'll do that. And you're like, okay, let me get approval. If you have to get, you have approval process, you say, okay, great, here you go. And that's on a Thursday afternoon, and you have a great weekend, and you show up on Monday morning and you have an email, I'm done. Right? That's the first kind. Ethan's that kind of guy when it comes to writing Motoko code. There are people who take it on and they are 4 weeks later, you'll check in, they're like, I've made progress. Here's my progress. 8 weeks, I've made progress. Here's my progress. So they're making progress, but it's very slow, and they eventually deliver. And those first 2 people, thank you all so much for all the work you've done, whether it's fast or slow. Sometimes it doesn't matter. As long as the work gets done, and in most of these instances, I think in almost all instances, you're probably making less answering a bounty than you would in other work because there's just not that much money out there being put up for bounties. The last 2 are a mixture of the second guy, but he just gets busy and goes and does something else. And so the bounty never gets done. And so you end up waiting 16 weeks, a little bit of progress, a little bit of progress, a little progress, and then silent, radio silence. Like they just disappear. And the fourth one is the person who shows up and says, I want to take the bounty. You say yes, and you don't hear from them ever again. They don't even check in. They just ghost. And on those last 2, when that happens, you lose a lot of time because often you'll have people show up and say, hey, is this open? Is this open? Is this open? People who are eager and might be that first type of person who would deliver it right away. And you just kind of have to say, no, this other person's working on it and they're making progress. So it's really an interesting problem to solve. I think as we're talking about incentive alignment, obviously one of the solutions there is to create a curve for the payout of the bounty, right? If it begins to curve down, the problem is if it's a harder problem than you thought, then you're sort of penalizing someone who sticks with it for a long time. So it's a little bit of a conundrum of maybe how to handle that.
I just keep thinking about board games, right? I keep thinking about this exists like a video game or a board game where we're taking a subset of human interactions and behavior and trying to put rails on them and then gamify it with carrots and sticks, right? And in a good version of those games, the computer doesn't cheat, right? So the computer is a fair player, and then you use the computer as a fair player to help kind of pen in the choices and the answers and what happens. And I think that's part of the appeal and the danger of a lot of blockchain stuff, right? Is that you take out some of that human negotiation factor and replace it with a set of rules. So what are, I'm going to turn this back to you. What are some games or some parallels that we think could be good? So I'll start with Monopoly, right? Monopoly is a game designed to destroy families from the inside out through the power of capitalism. So I don't think I don't think that's really, and every monopoly has the house rules, right? Or something like that. Or maybe Uno is a good, but what are some other games that are good examples of, hey, we have these sets of restrictions that sort of pen in your choices so that you can make, and then bad faith is punished, right?
Hmm.
I think that's important too, is the carrots and the sticks.
That's a great question. I haven't thought about it in the context of board games too much. I had some concepts I was trying to get through. This was a number of years ago, and I did try to actually design a board game in the same way that Monopoly was created to sort of show capitalism and its sort of precariousness when it comes to monopolies
Sure.
and destroy families. I tried to sort of create the same thing to put forth this sort of blockchain concept that I've been working on. And that's a really interesting exercise to walk through and try to create something that produces a principle or helps people learn. But Ethan, maybe I know with DAOball, you're sort of thinking through tabletop games. Maybe it's a tabletop game. Is it Dungeons and Dragons?
That's what I was just about to say. It's Dungeons and Dragons, right? Although again, Dungeons and Dragons does rely upon a centralized godlike figure to mete out reality, right? But in theory, it's like Dungeons and Dragons with a computer. It's Baldur's Gate 3. It's Dungeons and Dragons with an always fair arbiter of the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the beauty of the stuff I've been working on has been revolving a lot of that here, the clear set rules. You follow them, it's going to be good. And then just the challenge is to get everyone to come to a consensus on one, what the rules are, and two, what choice you got to be making, which is always fun. And I think I'm trying to make part of the game. But
Trying to think about other games. You can, of course, probably draw a lot from poker. What hand do you have? Right. So especially if you're competing over work, then people putting that bet in, that's certainly a mechanic that would be interesting, right? I'm willing to put $300 at stake that I can finish this work. I'm willing to put $700 at stake that I can finish this work. I'm willing to put $1,000, right? And so having a DAO that if you have a robust group of people who can come and do that work, that's a very interesting way to at least then if the person fails, the DAO has some economic advantage to that failure, and it's not all just loss.
Yeah, I think poker is actually not a bad one, right? Because you can act in good faith, you can act in bad faith, you can do whatever you want, but there comes a reckoning, and all the money you've put up for good faith or bad faith gets doled out, actually. Maybe that's how we should structure Moonshifts, is actually we structure it more like poker, where we're like, you have to put in, if you want to enter this competition, it costs you to enter, and then the winner gets the prize, and community funded
Oh gosh,
from the start.
just don't turn it into what was that? Those like penny auctions. No penny auctions. You can buy an Xbox for 30 cents. Okay, let me hit on these sub patterns real quick, and those may bring up some more discussion. So if you hear something interesting, speak up and interrupt me. But incentive alignment, of course, supports resource optimization in our pattern. And then it's supported by actually, we got a number of patterns here that it supports. So the first is a feedback reward system. And this, I think somebody mentioned reputation earlier, but
It was you. You
was it
mentioned
me?
reputation. Yeah, it was you.
Okay.
I'm just here to bolster your reputation as the reputation guy. But reputation is something we've been thinking a lot about too, actually. That is, obviously we do right now. Sorry, I know you like just started now. I'm just jumping right back in and interrupting
That
again.
this is the point. Go for it.
We're thinking a lot about reputation and different ways of growing reputation. So there's a couple pieces. One is we're talking to like Decide AI Mod Club about some of their reputation, proof of humanity stuff. One things we're doing right now is trying to embrace the sort of inherent blockchain transparency. So on every shift, everyone can see every accepted and every rejected and every pending shift. All of that is just completely transparent. inside of the system. So the idea being, hopefully you can see that the person administrating that shift, because that's outside of our control, is being a fair dealer. And so what we're doing right now is just doing it that way, but we could really see in the future featured shifts, highlighting users, having, what about users that are known for doing high quality work get paid more automatically, right, for getting your high quality work, and then validation of data as well. So, and validation and reputation, I think, kind of go hand in hand, because reputation is just validation attached to a user in a lot of ways. So could we require users to be validated in some way? Could we, for us, some of that stuff, it really quickly reaches into, oh, we should work with a Twitter API. And then I'm like, oh God, no, run away screaming, because not exactly I yearn for Twitter to bring a DAO-like stability to their operations, is what I would say in the future.
Yeah, I would say with the reputation systems, I was going to bring this up earlier. It's one of those very blockchain decentralized concepts that it's so simple in concept, but so hard to do, where it'll take so long to go, because it's like there are certain things, whether it's proof of humanity and whatnot, but reputation systems can be, I feel like, okay, for you have your own reputation, like Moonshift, let's say, has their own reputation system, and that's fine. And for people who are using Moonshift a lot, that can be helpful. But for the new people coming in, they're not going to have any reputation, and maybe they've done a bunch of work over here and over here and over here, but if all that reputation isn't connected up, and blockchain kind of allows for that, but the infrastructure isn't there, it's like, where do you even start with reputation? But if you guys did something, that'd be super cool. If, I don't know, we'll have a standard, but being able to, like, if I make an app, be able to go out to Moonshift and see what is the reputation of this individual, or be able to tie that. So if they come over to our system, then they'll be able to carry that reputation with them.
Yeah. So if you're a Diamond Club member on OpenChat, you can be extended those privileges within the syndicate of the ICP ecosystem. You're a made man. Should we be using more of a mob mentality kind of approach here with our metaphors for this? If you're in the family, if you come to me on the day of my daughter's moonshift asking this favor. No, I think I would say with a lot of the reputation stuff, for me, I see the power of that in the automated approvals that go along with it, right? That if you take that reputation, it's kind of fine for showing it to a human and being like, here's what the points this person has, or the merit badges this person has earned. That's fine in terms of informed decision making. But I think tying it into automation, tying it in again to using the blockchain and the computer as the fair broker DM behind it, where it says you do have this reputation, you're paid out automatically, you're getting more money automatically, you get access to these shifts. All of those pieces I think are super interesting.
We talked about the badge minter last week, and I think this is very much along those lines, like having that standard to mint those things and then beginning to make them interoperable. But I think one thing that would be really interesting is I'm going to put up $10 that I'm going to pay out in micropayments, but I'm going to put an extra $1 in there for the best one, so that I'm rating them as I go through, and then someone's going to get an extra $1, right? That would be an interesting way to begin to sort of farm that reputation and the sort of quality of work that the person's putting forward. I think that would certainly be something I'd be interested in doing as well.
It was on our feature list. It just got tipping and things like that. It just got cut in the mad drive to MVP release. So
tipping's interesting as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I know this as a software developer too. It's easy to come up with features that are nice to haves. And this is something I've come to feel quite strongly, is that more features is a negative, not a positive. That adding features, generally speaking, adding options is it's easy to have this mindset of, oh, well, we add this option and then more people that want that option. So we're increasing the number of people this tool approves to. So the more options we have, the more people will like the tool. And it's in fact the opposite, where you're now diluting the thing your tool is every time you add an option. This is my Apple background coming through here for sure. But users like software that works really well. And you get people in the door because your software works well and they request features. No one ever comes in and is like, oh my God, I love your 4,000 choices that you have here that makes it difficult to figure out how to start a shift and makes it, you're introducing complexity at every level. And that complexity, again, as in the sort of non-technical guy, that complexity reverberates through the application, where it's not just the technical complexity, it's the documentation, it's the user training, it's the tech support, it's all of that all of these features have a cost. So instead, for me, and this is really what we're thinking about very, very strongly now, is it's not just like, hey, is this feature nice? Is like nowhere near enough. Is this feature going to unlock our 10x growth potential? And if it doesn't, I don't even want to talk about it. Like how we've got limited resources and limited time, and we're a really small team, and we have to be really, really picky about our at-bats with these features. So that's the end of my rant. I'll let you get back to bring us back on track here.
That's great. That's great. So the second sub pattern is token-based rewards, which I think we're all probably pretty familiar with. Reputation systems is another one, sort of crosses over with feedback reward systems. Performance-based bonuses, I think we've touched on that a bit. Democratic participation initiatives. This is really important for governance, getting people to participate. Obviously, we're having some very interesting discussions over on the developer forums about grants for getting people to engage with democracy, which is an interesting dynamic. Obviously, people already have a reward based for voting, or at least following. And then
Australia, they get the day off to vote. So that's what I think is every time I vote on a NNS DAO proposal, I should get a day off. Is my suggestion for
DAO voting day.
Okay.
Yeah, every day is a DAO voting day if you try hard enough.
So I'm gonna venture into maybe some controversial political waters here, but I was thinking about this over the last week, and I think it's really interesting as we talk about all these concepts, especially on blockchains, that we keep this in mind. When we build these systems, we get to make the rules, and so a really great way to make rules is to barbell a system. Call it barbelling, where you sort of protect your downside so that you can't bust, but you leave yourself open to the sort of lucky volatility of a big win. Right? This is the situation we often want to put ourselves in, which is, if you've read any Nassim Taleb stuff, this is his sort of his deal.
So you invest in crypto. We got it. Yes.
This is why people buy all the meme coins, right? And then they hope one of them blows up. Blows up in a good way. So there's this controversy in U.S. politics right now that came up, and I'll avoid talking about parties or anything. I'll just talk about the actual monetary policy, which is there's a potential proposal for taxing unrealized gains, which has various different problems and issues with it. One of them being that you obviously often don't have the liquidity to pay if you haven't realized the gains. And I think the actual proposal excludes non-liquid assets. But people were generally arguing about this, and so about what an awful idea was. Let's say it's an awful idea, but how can we take that idea and barbell it so that it becomes a really interesting idea? And sort of what I've been thinking about, and if you could ignore the actual politics and just think about the concept, if we want people to pay more taxes and be happy about paying their taxes, you can incentivize them by giving them something if they reach that, right? So you have this idea of, as I was thinking about it, I was trying to come up with a name like the win tax, like you've won life. Right? If you get to the point where you have $100 million of unrealized gain, that's a big win, right? So if you get to that point, instead of looking at it as a penalty and saying, okay, now you got to pay 25 million in taxes. What if you said, if you pay 25 million in taxes, we won't tax the next 200 million, right? So you create a system where people are like, I want to go win. I'm going to reach that point. I'm going to pay the tax, and then I'm going to go make another 200 million that's not going to get taxed, right?
You're so close to accidentally inventing graduated taxes, which then everyone will refuse to understand for motivational. Now, how incendiary would you like my response to this to be? Would you like me to make it so you can't podcast ever again? Would you like me just to burn my own career down? What would you like to see here?
I would say probably given the political climate out there on crypto Twitter, you may want to consult your co-founders before you answer.
It's not my fault that everyone else's political opinions are wrong. So I'll just show my cards. My political alignment is eat the rich, and I am not represented well by either political party. I think to sort of, again, to try and maybe take out a little bit of the politics of the idea, I would say, and apply your barbelling theory to it. Part of the problem is so for example, I think we all know, Austin, you are mega wealthy and operate a nonprofit for funsies. So obviously obviously, by the way, I hate to point this out. Your chandelier behind you needs dusting so badly. You should get your butler on that.
My chandelier.
Yeah. Looks, that crystal doesn't sparkle like it should. If you have, so you've got a couple bill in the bank, just chilling, and you're living off of it, you can borrow against that. You can do all sorts of things that, without realizing the gains, are huge upsides, right?
Yeah.
And so that is how, right? That is, if you're mega wealthy, that's what you do. You don't spend your money, you borrow against it, and you spend the debt with that as collateral. And then lots of people just die and are like, that's not my problem in the afterlife. So there we have an unlopsided barbell. And so I think part of the idea behind taxing the unrealized gains is, hey, you have this huge upside and there's no downside, right? So there could be, now again, I understand that there is a political strain that is going to say taxation is theft and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't entirely agree with that, but I also don't like my tax dollars being spent on unjust wars and genocide. So no one is happy with any, it'd be a different, now I really am going to show my cards, where it'd be a different story. If you tied unrealized gain tax to universal income, I would get on board with that instead of just pumping it into a system that continues to make the ultra wealthy even wealthier. What I want is people to be happy and be able to pursue their lives, and the constant fear of death and bankruptcy shouldn't be the determining factor. If there was more of a social support system, I would have become an entrepreneur way earlier in my life than I did. And so I think the idea behind that is that taxation should be fair, and taxation should be used for leveling the playing field and lifting those up that are in systematic problems. Now, the taxation system is corrupt. The appropriation of those funds is corrupt. Again, my political alignment is eat the rich, so no one's happy. But I think thinking about what you're describing there, it's that if you have $1 billion in the bank, there's so many things you can do with that $1 billion that aren't realized the gains, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, all of those things have been specifically developed to find, money's like water. It's always going to find the path of least resistance.
Right.
So it's not like if we open up unrealized gains taxing, it wouldn't, I don't really believe it would fundamentally change any of these things.
Well, I think
was that both cynical and burn it down enough?
No, I think
you said you wanted a hot podcast when we started here.
I think it's great, and so what I would encourage people to do is when you hear that, whichever side you're on, you're going to hear ideas that you think are terrible. And I think this is our job as people who are pro Web3, right? When you hear a bad idea, think about it. Think about blockchain. Figure out a way to make it a good idea. How can you use blockchain as a tool to take what is a terrible idea, but in and of itself, but that if you join it with this plus this in an open and decentralized manner, it becomes a really, really interesting and good idea. It's something that people would choose to do, even, right? Like there are universes out there with a kind of taxation that people are super excited about.
Okay, hold on.
like
You're going to go from taxation to multiverse? We're really going from, okay, Loki, like, what are we doing here? I don't want to argue about
I think I
MCU.
think
That's too hot for me. I
I think you brought the MCU into this
I
earlier.
don't not this Jesse Prime would never do that here. No, I think you're touching on a really good point. Like it's exactly what I said, where it's not just the taxation and the money going out the door. It's the feeling that I'm not getting back that investment from my point of view as an investment in the social good. I don't feel that I'm getting back my fair share of social good for my input on it. And so it would be really great in some theoretical parallel Earth where you pay your taxes and then you see, oh, my taxes fed this family, or my taxes did this, instead of my taxes buying bombs and death and destruction.
And it's really when your payments are on a blockchain and you can track where the money went, and you have a DAO and you're attempting to accomplish things. This ties back into impact measurement, which we talked about last week. You can actually do some of this. You can actually track, okay, the DAO wanted to create some magic internet money for task X. Great.
Mm-hmm.
So where'd the money go? Okay, where did that person send the money? Right? What did they do with those funds? Was it
Yeah.
impactful? Did it produce something? You guys are going to have an interesting, especially if you stick sort of in the social media space. This is an awesome way to measure the impact, right? Like, hey, this tweet brought this many people into your account to follow your account or to click throughs or whatever. I don't know if Twitter gives that data or not, but I would imagine they would be advantaged if they did provide you with
Now
some of those statistics.
I'm looking at our chat here, and you wrote two things. You wrote, one, I don't think my chandeliers are dusty, and I don't know why you need to write that there. And two, that you are ready to reveal your secret plan for using DAOs to solve the military-industrial complex. So, Austin, I'm ready. I'm ready to hear it. Let's go.
I wrote a book about it. You can find it on Amazon.
It's a little podcast humor.
I wrote a book about it. You can find it on Amazon. But I'll save that. I'll save that.
GPT, please write a book for me about. No, but I think it is. I think for me, it is like when I have gotten into crypto, and I was not a kind of crypto-y guy in the past, and I still am on the outside of a lot of crypto-y opinions. But one of the things that is interesting is when I talk to people about crypto and specifically about DAOs, there is a utopian worldview that underpins some of these blockchain ideas that I think you're kind of tapping a little bit. And there's the utopianness, there's the libertarianness, there's a bunch of different sort of strains that come together to make a big crypto tent that's united by all these very differing needs. But that transparency, radical open source, complete blockchain auditability of every detail, that is a strain of crypto thinking I really, really, really like. And that's certainly something, like I said, we tried to tap into a little bit with all business done on Moonshift is in public. There is no private Moonshifts right now, right? And that was a decision we made to reflect that blockchain transparency in there. And so I think a lot of what you're talking about of barbelling, exactly that. How can these technology stacks be applied to create projects? And so I don't think DAOs are a perfect solution for everything. I think that's part of a little bit. We're in a real exploratory discovery phase of finding out what DAOs are good for right now, I think, right? So DAOs maybe are not good for being the mayor of a town. DAOs are maybe not good for maybe they're good for owning property, maybe they're not. There's different, but they can be good for managing, software, right? So I always thought you hear about some guy that lives in his mom's basement that is the sole code contributor for Apache and is the one guy holding the entire internet together. And to me, that is the perfect DAO piece of software, right? Where it really goes after the common good. It really goes after, again, underpinned by open source and those pieces. And so finding those problem sets where I would definitely, again, showing a little my heart, maybe corporations, for-profit corporations aren't the solution to every problem in a society. And DAOs exist in this sort of in between nonprofits and corporations as a communal effort. And we need more ways for people to work together collectively, and DAOs are that. They're right. They're a unique primitive for a way for people to collaborate together using technology in a way that was never possible before.
Yep.
Did I just get optimistic about DAOs? What happened? I
Maybe,
felt weird.
maybe. Our last pattern here is well-being, which I think ties it together here, and maybe we'll sort of bring it to a close because this was a big long one, and I don't want to go too long here, but well-being, right?
I told you we record 3 hours for every podcast I'm on. Those are the rules. That's why Kyle's not here anymore.
When you go to align your incentives, keep well-being in mind, right? And I imagine Moonshift's going to talk about this in y'all's meetings a lot. How do you keep from turning something into a grind? And a second, we've talked about in this podcast how you don't want your participation in a DAO to become a second job, right? We all have jobs, and I think everybody has a little bit of uh, time to engage with these systems because they're interesting and there's something to be gained. But man, if I have to go vote on the NNS and the SNS and it takes me 2.5 hours to get through everything, I'm not doing that every 4 days. And so you have to make sure you find a DAO structure and delegate authority and use proper executive action, all of those things, so that and as you design your incentives, so that you don't turn this whole thing into just another job for people who already have things that they're doing.
Oh, I've got the best topic here to wrap us up. Let's burn this podcast to the ground. As a strongly pro follow neuron, I really believe in the power of the follow neuron. I really like follow neurons in terms of I hate voting. I agree. It's busy work. I'm not reviewing code. I'm non-technical. I'm a busy guy. I've got a family. I've got meals to cook. I've got video games to play. I've got a Moonshift business to run. I use the follow technology. And we have the proposal for the reaffirmation of following requirements that popped up on the boards there. I think there's basically an argument being made there, right? That the amount of work is not enough, right? That with follow neurons, that it's permanent, that there's a level of engagement that should be required from getting paid for DAO participation. So final answer, do you support the Dfinity suggestions for how to restructure follow neurons? No feedback will be allowed, I should also add.
So if you go through our pattern language, you'll find a number of answers to that question, I think, which is we have some patterns. There's one called seasons. There's one called celebrations. And I think the answer to this is a mixture of seasons and celebrations, where, yes, I think that follow neurons are incredibly powerful. I think that the optimal liquid democracy system is one where we have people giving thoughtfulness to who they are following and following experts in those particular topics, but it can't be a job. So I think somewhere between this mix of seasons and celebrations, we can find a way to make this fun and exciting and useful. And it's a day a year or a day every other year. Couple it with learning, couple it with celebration. And hey, today's the day we're all going to go. And yes, you got to go redo your neurons, but it's not going to be, you don't have to go every Wednesday. You got to go on, Definity's birthday or whatever, right? Something along those lines. I don't know the best solution for the decay if you don't do that. But again, I think it's looking at the problem and trying to make it fun and trying to make it something that brings the community together and helps develop well-being. Why not have a Zoom call with 50,000 people on it, and we all go do this one task at one time, and it's over for the year. And we do this with our elections, right? We do it every 4 years. Everybody goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for 3.5 months and kills each other on Twitter and says they're never going to talk to anybody again. And then we have the presidential election and somebody wins, and then we all are fined for another 3.5 years until we go
Okay,
crazy.
I don't appreciate you forcing your political views by saying somebody wins like that. Okay, I don't know if you're following U.S. politics, but that is definitely that is not necessarily on the menu.
Well, fair enough, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Mhm. Yeah, you want to replace the NNS current voting interface with something I'll describe as Souls-like in terms of it's based on hand-to-hand combat with weapons, and whoever wins there gets to vote.
Yeah, no, not quite, but yeah, I think if you're building a DAO, you consider the cadence of human life, real human life, and you build your administration and governance systems around it. I'll be controversial and say I think the NNS does a really poor job of this right now. It is built like a computer system, like a bunch of people who are really good at computer systems would build. And
Right.
I'm as guilty as that as anyone. Like that's a system I build, right, without thinking about it and without approaching it from a different standpoint. Um, and so finding a way to reduce that overhead, I think, is important for the
Software
long.
is hard.
Yeah.
Software's so hard. It's like so many choices, and under every rock is unlimited complexity. And I think thinking about that user journey, that user experience, that again, that series of carrots and sticks. I'll give a perfect example we've talked about with Moonshift, where we're like, should we have an approve all button? Should we have an automated recommendation for approval? And there's a part of me that's like, yes, I really want to reduce friction and I want to make it easier for people to get it done and get back to work. But I also think reviewing the submitted shifts, that's the work. That's the engagement, right? And if you lower the threshold so low that you actually no longer require engagement with the system, then what are we doing here? Like if we're asking people to create content, you have to review the content. But I'm not sure how that's even a good idea to bypass that correctly, right? You can ask an AI to do it, but you're still going to end up with I saw a tweet that was like, I want AIs to do the dishes and mop the floor so I can write and paint, not I can do dishes and mop the floor while my AI writes and paints, right? How
Right.
do we use the AI to help with the busy work, but still leave that human creative and judgment piece there?
Yeah. Yeah. I just as feedback on that particular point, I think the AIs would be interesting from the standpoint of if the AI can identify obvious misuse of the platform, that's a huge win. And if they can collate impact as
Yeah.
well, that'd be really, really interesting to see.
Yep. Agreed.
All right, well, so we won't do a big question. We'll push back our other stuff until next time. Ethan, do you have any closing thoughts on what we've heard today or what we've talked about?
No, I'll just say just to throw my hat in for the periodic confirmation.
Yeah, get in
I'm
there.
yeah. I want some hate on Twitter. I'm in agreement. I think some people just kind of look for how am I going to solve all the internet's voting issues? And it's like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think this solves a problem. I don't think it's too much to ask to have people just log in every X amount of time and just make sure that the people they're following even vote or they're still in line with what you're doing, or being able to cut out some of the people who are just not really participating and they shouldn't be rewarded because they're not actively following or participating someone, which I think is a good thing because the NNS is just looking for what is this an immense amount of people, what is their consensus on something? And if you're not continually make sure that that's up to date, then you're kind of losing out on what the true consensus is. So I think it's a good step, but it's not gonna like solve. There are many other problems that have to be addressed.
Hold on one sec while I unfollow Ethan's neuron for his radical opinions. I
All
actually
right.
do think I'm pretty sure I follow the ICDevs neuron. I'm pretty sure I set that like 3 years ago and never changed it. So
We've been, I mean, we have, first of all, we've been a little bit lax in our governance oversight because we sort of realized that we we didn't have the resources to do a very good job of it. But we built ourselves a tool to make sure we automatically vote on everything. So
those sweet rewards.
That's the issue, is that as soon as you put something like this in place, something pops up to automate it. So we'll see how successful it is. I don't know. Jesse, thank you so much for your time. If you want to check out Moonshift, is it moonshift.app?
Moonshift.app, accessible from a Chrome browser using Plug wherever you are. And then you can follow us on X/Twitter at moonshift.app. That's me too. And then I also want to plug, we're really serious about dog fooding everything. So we're hosting our entire community in open chat as well. And we've been putting together a really lively community there, which has been really fun too. We're posting all the new shifts in there. I'm actually running some shifts right now, asking people to make memes. And and so thank you to everyone that's been creating memes on Moonshift, Austin included. Some of your shifts have been really exciting to see on there. Ethan, a little more from you would be nice. It's
Some memes on
he's got some good ones up.
Just making trouble. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
listen, can't come on here and just talk DAO governance. Got to stir the pot a little, give you some content to promote.
And then if you want to go down the rabbit hole, DAOs at daos.icdevs.org, you can go through all these patterns and sort of go down the rabbit hole, and please give us feedback. If you want to subscribe, that helps us get closer to being able to use YouTube to monetize for the charity. And we'll talk to you again soon. We'll tackle a couple more patterns. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.